Hi guys! So I am back with my second reading wrap-up of the year so far. Basically, these are all the books that I've read in the time between when I last did a reading wrap-up and now. And there's actually quite a few here because I had to read a lot for school, so let's just get into it. The first book that I read was for my children's literature class, and that is Nancy Drew and the Secret of the Old Clock by Carolyn Keene. Now luckily I already owned this book and I didn't have to buy it from the bookstore, but I'd never read it before. I just kind of had it, and I never even read it when I was younger. I'd never really got into Nancy Drew that much, and it was pretty good. I mean, the writing wasn't super incredible or anything, but it's not supposed to be. Like, it's meant for children, it's supposed to be an easy read. Like, it wasn't award-winning prose or anything by any means, but it was still really good. I enjoy reading it. I rated it 4 stars on Goodreads. That's basically all I have to say about it. It's just Nancy Drew, you know. The next book that I read was also for that same children's literature class, and that is The Keeper of the Isis Light by Monica Hughes. This book won an award, it says right there, but I'd never heard of it, and I don't know if it's a well-known children's book. It might be more of a teen book, I'm not really sure. Basically, this is a sci-fi book. You can probably tell from the cover. It's about this girl named Olwen who lives on a planet called Isis, which isn't Earth. She was born there. She mans the Isis Light, which is basically like an intergalactic kind of lighthouse so that travelers coming through space from Earth can find the planet. Now she's about 16 and there's this group of settlers coming from Earth to live on Isis, and it's just kind of her journey through that and kind of interacting with new people for the first time. Story about the settlers and the planet as a whole, and it's really good. I found this edition that I have has a lot of spelling mistakes in it. Not a ton, but enough that were noticeable, and I'm kind of how did this slip past editors? So that little bit bothered me, but the actual writing itself was really good. I like the whole idea of there being this other planet other than Earth, and that there's been someone who's only known this other planet and doesn't know much about Earth or the people that live there, and kind of has to learn to integrate into what normal society, or what we would consider a normal society. If you haven't read this book before, I would recommend it just because I feel like it's one of those kind of, gems. Maybe not a lot of people have heard of it, but it's genuinely really good. My Goodreads rating for it was 3.5 stars. It wasn't up there with the best that I've read this year, but it was very good. Would recommend. The next book that I have is also for that children's literature class. I had to read both The Keeper of the Isis Light and this one within the span of a week because they were both essay topics and I wanted to read both books so that I could kind of decide which one I wanted to do my essay on. So this next book is When You Reach Me by Rebecca Stead. It's about this girl Miranda who's living in New York City in 1979, I think, and she starts receiving these mysterious notes from someone, and she doesn't know who the person is or why the notes are being sent because they're all very cryptic and she doesn't quite understand. The notes tell her that she has to write a letter about what happened, and that's kind of how the story unfolds. This is Miranda telling her story, and I think it's just over the course of the fall what happens, and it kind of flashes forward to the present moment, not our present time, but her present moment and her writing about the things that happened to her in the past. Time is a big thing in this novel, just the passage of time and what time means and all that. Another big thing that this book deals with is again, appearances and judging people based on appearances or based on first impressions, and maybe learning through talking to that person or through, gaining more insight into their life what they're actually like, and maybe that first perception of them wasn't correct. The story is really, really interesting and engaging, and all the characters are awesome. I was very interested in each of the characters. They're all very three-dimensional, and the mystery element of the book is also interesting because you are given clues as you go along to what's going on, but you don't quite pick up on it till maybe closer to the end. And it all just fits together really well. And the writing itself is just really nice, really beautiful. I rated this 5 stars on Goodreads. I don't throw out 5-star ratings a lot, maybe I should do it more, but I always kind of reserve it for books that I find to be just really great. Not, maybe not perfect, but very, very close to it. I just really loved this book and I would recommend it to everyone. Please read this, it's so good. Next is a book that I had to read for my conflict in Canadian literature course, and that is Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. This is the first in a trilogy of books. It's not quite dystopian, it's not quite sci-fi. I think she called it herself speculative fiction, so kind of a what-if scenario. The what-if in this book is kind of what if one person had access to all of the technology and was able to basically run things. It's about a society where science has kind of run rampant, and especially genetic manipulation of animals is a huge thing in this book, and the book kind of flashes between 2 storylines. The first storyline is of Snowman, who is one of the last survivors of a giant plague that kind of wiped out the entire human population of Earth. The other storyline is his memories from before. So before all this happened, what his life was like before then, and kind of the events leading up to what happened and what caused the plague. That's kind of the best summary I can give without talking about it too much because it's hard to explain stuff about this book without spoiling things, I guess. This is the first Margaret Atwood book that I've read. I've been meaning to read her for a while, but I just haven't gotten around to it, and then I kind of had to for class, so there's that. Now, I don't want to judge all of her writing based on one book, but I didn't like this book that much. I don't want that to like deter me from reading her other books, because maybe it was just this book or the series or the subject matter that didn't particularly resonate with me. Yeah, it wasn't my favorite. I didn't like the characters was the main thing. There was like no characters that I liked. The main character really bothered me. I just didn't like Jimmy. And also they don't tell you very much of what happened, like you kind of have to piece things together as you go, and I'm the type of person that would prefer more exposition rather than less at the beginning of a book. Like, if you can do exposition well, I love that, because I don't like not knowing for like 3/4 of the book what's going on. Some people do, I just personally don't. So yeah, it wasn't like the worst thing I've ever read, but it wasn't like, I didn't enjoy it that much, and I don't really care to read the rest of the series, so I probably won't. I ended up rating it 2 stars on Goodreads, not necessarily for quality, just for my own enjoyment. That's basically what my Goodreads ratings are, by the way. I try to rate them more on how I enjoyed them rather than actual writing style, because there's a lot of books that have excellent writing that I just don't like, so I wanted to be able to separate those two things. So the next book I read was for my Shakespeare course, and it's once again in this giant Shakespeare anthology that I showed you last time, and that was Othello. Now, I've read Othello before. I read it last year for class, and I really liked it, and I liked it even better the second time around, because now that I knew what the story was already about, I can focus more on like the writing and the details and stuff, and it just made it more enjoyable. Othello's probably up there with my favorite Shakespeare plays. My favorite of all time is Hamlet, but Othello's probably up there in the top 3 because of the characters. Specifically, Iago is just so good. He's just such a good villain. Ugh, like, he's a terrible person, but a great villain. Emilia is one of my favorite female characters in Shakespeare's entire repertoire. I've written 2 essays on her now. I wrote one on her last year, and I wrote another one on her this year. And yeah, I ended up rating this one 4 stars on Goodreads. And the next book is yet another one for my children's literature class. We have to read a lot for this one. And that is Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne. Again, I know a lot about Winnie the Pooh. I used to watch the movies and the TV show especially when I was little, but I'd never read like the original source material, so that was really fun. This book is so cute. I feel like if you're a fan of Alice in Wonderland, you'll like this, because they have very similar writing styles, and that there's a lot of like nonsense, but it also makes sense in a way, and it has all the really cute little iconic drawings in it, and honestly, reading this book made me want to watch all the Winnie the Pooh movies and read more Winnie the Pooh books, because this is just like the first of many. And I really want to see that movie that just recently came out called Goodbye Christopher Robin. I think Margot Robbie and Domhnall Gleeson are both in it. So yeah, this book just basically sparked my new obsession with Winnie the Pooh, apparently. Not that that's a bad thing. I also rated this one 4 stars. Okay guys, we're getting close to the end. Just 3 more left, I think. But believe it or not, the next book I read was just for my own enjoyment and not for school. And that book is Passenger by Alexander Bracken. I have read this before, but I bought the second book, Wayfarer, when it first came out like 2 or 3 years ago. And it's just been sitting on my bookshelf since then, and I never picked it up, and then I just forgot what happened in this book. And I just wanted to finally finish the series, so I was like, okay, I need to reread the first book so that I remember what happened and like the storyline and the characters, because it's a lot to remember because it involves time travel, and that's just confusing on its own, especially when you don't remember what happened in the first book and everything. This book is about a girl named Etta, who is a violinist. That's kind of what she sees herself doing for the rest of her life, as being, you know, a musician. But she finds out that she's actually able to time travel and part of this giant family of time travelers. It's a book about time travel. What else do you need? Now, what I find interesting about this is that it's a type of time travel where you can change the past and you create different timelines and stuff by changing things in the past. You can easily create different timelines by accidentally messing something up, or talking to the wrong person, or causing too big of a ruckus, which obviously creates a lot of problems in the series itself. The characters are really interesting. I like both Etta and Nicholas, who's the other protagonist. And I like the time travel elements because I like history, I like learning about the past, so I think it would be cool to be able to visit the past. I wouldn't want to live in the past by any means, but anyways, I rated it 4 stars on Goodreads, and I am currently like halfway through reading Wayfarer, which is the sequel, and I think the final book, like it's only a duology, and so far I'm enjoying it. So the next book I read was also for that conflict in Canadian literature class, and that is The Xenotext, Book 1 by Christian Book. Basically how I would describe this is that it's like a book of science poetry. The author has this project where he wants to encode a poem in the genetic structure of a microbe that's supposed to like basically be able to outlive everything, so that hypothetically, once humans are all like wiped out from the earth, and if like some other species or aliens or whatever finds this microbe, they'll find evidence of possible past human life. It's a thing. I'm personally a little bit cynical about it, but that's just me. And this book is just like poetry kind of about the project and introducing you to the idea of the project. The actual poem that he's putting in to the microbe isn't in this book at all, which is slightly confusing if that's what you're expecting, because you're not going to find it here. There's a lot of poetry that kind of involves Greek mythology and nature and stuff like that. It's very dense, it's a bit taxing to read. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you're like super into this stuff. Like, it's not a casual read. I wouldn't have ever picked it up if it hadn't been for school. I didn't really like it that much, but I don't love science that much, and I also don't love poetry, and I wish I did. I like the idea of poetry. My brain just shuts off every time I try and read poetry. It's like I can't form the words into like a coherent thought. It's like, it's hard for me to explain, but my brain just doesn't get poetry. But I guess it's an interesting thing to look into if you're into that type of science, or if you're really into poetry, I guess. I rated it 2 stars on Goodreads. And finally, we're at the end. This is the last thing that I read. Again, from my giant Shakespeare anthology, I read King Lear. Again, this is a reread of this one. I read it in high school, and again, I liked it better the second time that I read it because I already knew the plot, so I could focus more on the details and the characters, and I just had a better appreciation for it this time because I didn't really like it that much the first time around. Again, I think it's the characters that really get me in this one. They're all very interesting with all their own motives, and the 2 parallel storylines of fathers and their children is really interesting. It's a really good play. I rated it 4 stars. So those are all the books that I read recently. There's a lot, but that was just because of school. I think there's going to be a bit of a slowdown now because I don't have as many books to read for school, and it's kind of getting closer to essay time than, you know, reading time. Let me know what you've been reading recently, or if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!